Welcome to this Sunday afternoon Sutta study program at the Dhamma Darini. As you can see, I've moved outside. It's there's some pollen in the air, but otherwise it's really delightful out here. It's very warm and fresh, and the sun is shining. There's not any wind, almost no wind, just a very gentle breeze happening. So anybody who lives in the Bay Area who wants to join us in person for the Sunday programs, welcome to do so, because we'll be having the programs outside here as long as the weather is nice. And in the future, if the weather is not nice, we'll have the possibility for day visitors to attend in person using our meditation hall here at the monastery. I'm welcoming Ananea, Chintana, Dilshan, Flo, Karen, Richard, Ramona, Sharanya, and Susan for today's sutta study, together with Brianna and Brent, who are in-person visitors with us today. I'm going to open the sutta that I selected for today. This is number 2.14 in the Suttanipata. It's called the Dhammika Sutta. And this is a sutta that has been very dear to me for a long time, because I was at first exposed to the traditional patterns of the visitors coming to the Buddhist temple in their observances and the uposta observances and so forth. And I didn't at first know that there was a spot right there in the earliest level of the text where the Buddha himself recommended this particular practice. And so that's sort of the charming aspect of this sutta. Thus I have heard, on one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Then the lay follower Dhammika, together with 500 lay followers, approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, and sat down to one side. Sitting to one side, the lay follower Dhammika addressed the Blessed One in verses. When they say 500 followers, that's not a precise number, but it's a symbolic number that means a lot of lay followers. And we read in the commentary that this Dhammika was wise and good, and that he was a non-returner, meaning he'd had the noble attainments up to the third level. Everything short of being a fully enlightened arahant. Chintana is here in person. I'm going to wait a minute until she's able to get seated. This is Venerable Vandana, who's visiting us from India. And this is, let's see, Chintana, Brent, and Brianna. We're just starting in on the Dhammika Sutta from the Suttanipata. So here is Dhammika's question. I ask you, Gautama, one of broad wisdom, how does a good disciple act, whether one who has gone from home to homelessness, or those lay followers who live at home? And then comes an extravagant few verses of praise for the Buddha. For you know the course and destination of the world, together with its devas. There is none equal to you, one who shows the subtle meaning, for they say you are the excellent Buddha. Having directly experienced all knowledge, you reveal the Dhamma, taking compassion on beings. Your coverings are removed. You are the universal eye. Stainless, you shine radiantly in all the world. And now comes a few verses where he's referring to the divine beings, the Nagas and the Devas. Ravana, the Naga king, came into your presence when he heard you are the conqueror. Having consulted with you, he departed, saying, Excellent, delighted to have heard your words. And now I need to pause for a second and read you what the commentary said about this Ravana. This is showing something about the worldview of the ancient people, which is quite interesting. It says here in the first verse, this Ravana, it is said, was the name of a young deva who could assume whatever form he wished. He lived in a celestial mansion. When Sakka, who is in some cases referred to as the creator god, meaning he thinks he's the creator, but he's not, but he thinks he is. When Sakka goes to play in the park, Ravana becomes an elephant, having created a body 150 yojanas in length, with 33 frontal globes. On each of his globes there are 2 tusks. On each tusk, 7 lotus ponds. In each lotus pond, 7 lotus plants. On each lotus plant, 7 lotus flowers. On each flower, 7 petals. And on each petal, 7 nymphs are dancing. These are Sakka's dancing girls, known as the lotus nymphs. In the middle of those 33 globes is the Tudasana, the beautiful one, which is 30 yojanas in size, on which there is a jeweled couch, a yojana long, spread out in a floral pavilion, 3 yojanas wide. A yojana is said to be the length of time that a ox can pull a cart in one day, which is approximately 7 miles. So you can do the math. So there is a yojana spread out in a floral pavilion, 21 miles or 3 yojanas wide. There, Sakka, ruler of the Devas, surrounded by a company of nymphs, enjoys his celestial splendor. But when Sakka has returned from playing in the park, Ravana withdraws that form and again becomes a young Deva. So that's his description. I'm not going to read you all of these commentarial descriptions, but it seemed to me that there was a way that the ancient people must have been relating to the natural world, to the landscapes, the forests and the valleys and the hills and the flora and the fauna that were living in that space, and they must have felt the presence of a kind of a living, breathing, spiritual individuality that may have been pervading certain precincts of the forest. And so then in their way of imagining or poetically expressing it, then you had this sort of a supersized, massively gigantic individual spirit or intelligence. And then in like a series of Russian dolls going from scale to scale, going down and down and down, smaller and smaller and smaller, to the petal of the lotus flower with the 7 dancing nymphs on the petal. And so it's seeing that that life itself in a magical kind of way has permeated with some kind of essence of living beings from the most tiny microscopical level, like at the insect level. There's a life that's like a full universe at that microscope, and then also at the cosmic level. So this is the world of the ancients. Mm. So this Ravana heard the Buddha's words and said, "Excellent." And then here's another being, King Vaisavana Kuvera, also approached you inquiring about the Dhamma. When questioned, you answered him, "O wise one," and he too, having listened, was delighted. Adherents of other sects given to debate, whether Ajivakas or Nigantas, all fail to overtake you in wisdom, as one standing cannot overtake one walking swiftly. These Brahmins given to debate, and also some who are elder Brahmins, are all dependent on you for the meaning, as are others who think themselves debaters. For this Dhamma, subtle and blissful, has been well proclaimed by you, Blessed One. All wish to hear that alone. When asked, declare it to us, Supreme Buddha. All these bhikkhus sitting together, and the lay followers as well, wish to hear it. Let them hear the Dhamma realized by the Stainless One, as the Devas listen to Vasava's well-spoken words. Um, part of the basis for being able to hear the teachings of the Buddha is what's referred to as saddha, sometimes translated as confidence. I think of it as it has an element of trust, an element of believability, and it has an element of I think there's an aesthetic element of it, that there's this awesome sublime, transformative state when encountering one who is so great, who has attained so much, and who is so purely good and has the skill to know the right words in the right way to teach us, and is not capable of any kind of selfishness or ill will or harmfulness in any way whatsoever. So this is doesn't need to be confused with what you could say a superstitious, credulous, just in a shallow way. You see some guru who's got a personality or something, or you see that everybody else is following one guru and you just follow along, and you think because they're very well dressed and they have a Mercedes and they have many thousands of disciples or something, that you then are overwhelmed or overtaken and just following without that, but rather that I would say, like, the goodness of the Buddha is such that if you have confidence, there's like no bottom to how far you can go with the help to be gained from having that confidence and being willing to undertake what's suggested. I wanted to pause here for a second and see if others have any questions or comments about this aspect of saddha, or confidence, which is one of the first marks of the of our noble path, even before the practice of sila. So I invite if there's any comments or questions now about this. Okay, is that Flo?
Yeah,
Would you? Okay, go
yeah.
ahead.
Is this similar or the same as faith, or sort of like a different thing?
Well, it used to be always translated as faith, and then in the modern time, some in the English-speaking world became uncomfortable with faith because with the translation of saddha with the English word faith, because they felt that faith was too close, that Western Christian faith is too close to superstition. And they were trying to say that it's not anything to do with a superstitious kind of faith. But it is, faith is one way that it is translated. It has the qualities of confidence and trust, and it's based on, it can be tested. So if you met a teacher, you might check them out and find out, are their ethics as pure as it seems? You would investigate them and see whether, when they're in private, do they behave with the same high standard of ethics when they do when they're out on the stage? And you would test them and see if they if they gain a lot of fame and followers do they become conceited and corrupted, or do they keep their purity even when they became famous? So that's like the first level. And if somebody passes that test, and then the things they seem to be teaching appear to be sensible, then you might listen to that teacher and follow those teachings. Then as you listen and follow those teachings, then you would test for yourself whether in your own experience those teachings are effective. And then the more you test and practice and test and practice, the more you have a definite confidence that the teacher is good and the teachings are effective. And then when you reach your own opening of your own Dhamma eye and realize the transformation of personality through the fruits of this practice, then in the end, you don't really need faith anymore because you have your own. So you're not needing to put faith on someone else. But that kind of faith in someone else when you've not yet realized is definitely something that helps us along the way and even is essential. And it's partly because it gives us the courage to try to follow this path. And second, because it's a cause of happiness. And the happiness we get from having confidence in a good teacher is something that helps us to keep going. It helps us to stay motivated. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it's definitely something I've experienced. I feel like in parts too, where I feel like both through practicing and failing to practice, I've been like, oh no, these teachings are really working, and verifying that in part I feel like makes me like more confident in the parts I haven't verified.
Yes, that's it. And you just really need enough faith to keep going. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to call on Chintana and ask if she doesn't mind talking into the microphone so people can hear you.
Thank you. I wanted to mention, I think I can see a difference between the faith that Christians have and the faith that Buddhists have. And the faith that Buddhists have, you are asked to, like you said, to test it and to see if it is indeed working. Whereas with the Christian faith, you're not supposed to test the God. So I wanted to point that out.
We have one person who attends this group sometimes who has said, who has a very scientific mentality and is definitely not faith oriented. And when she read that the Buddha only points the way, and he says, and where the Buddha gives the invitation, come and see. That's what gave her the faith, was that very invitation to test it. Yeah. So I can continue reading. Oh, Maureen. Oh, there. Go ahead, Maureen. Make sure you're unmuted. Okay.
I do have confidence and expect to see improvements in myself. When there was a battle that they were fighting, I think Waterloo, and the flags went up on the ships. England expects every man to do his duty. But actually, what the Admiral, Lord Nelson, wanted to say was England confides that everyone will do their duty. And he wanted that sense of confidence that people in England were depending on this battle going their way. I know it's a poor example for Buddhism, but the confides and expectations is what we're talking about, I think, that builds as you use the tools that the Buddha gave you. Yes, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. That's a wonderful metaphor. And, our own journey is going to be that equally as dramatic as the Battle of Waterloo in the end. Whether it's just coming out of the depths of our previous mistakes, or whether it's obtaining the highest and obtaining levels of awakening, it's that significant. It's not less than that. So, okay, I'm going to continue reading. Now, the Buddha speaks first about the deportment of a monk. A bhikkhu should not wander at the wrong time, but at the proper time she should walk to the village for alms. For ties stick to one given to untimely wandering. Hence, the Buddhas do not wander at the wrong time. The right time for wandering is in the morning, between dawn and noon. At other times, one might run into, wandering at nighttime, we might fall into a ditch, or you might run into robbers, or you could run into a prostitute, or you could run into all kinds of things. So that's what we're doing now is we're undertaking a life that has a certain orderly structure. And even though it seems kind of superficial that the structure is that you eat during these parts of the day, or you go to the village during this part of the day and not a different part, nevertheless, this pattern of having the stability of an orderly pattern in life, I think, is also sort of setting a condition for having an orderly mind, which is capable of having agency to choose and not just let the mind wander everywhere, but that you can choose where and when to place the mind. And one can have a certain amount of stability because of having an orderly life, that then there's like freedom within stability. And then just the same way, we're aiming for an ultimate experience of an ultimate kind of freedom. But the freedom that we experience is nothing to do with the chaotic life of a person who's has no self-control and is just pushed and pulled by the whims every which way. Even they say that there's the little test about the children and the marshmallows, and the child who's able to wait 10 minutes before having the marshmallow, that child is struggling to develop self-control, and the one who's able to do that has got a happy life. And the child who can't help themselves and they just take the marshmallow is the one who suffers a lot later on. So that's part of one of the themes of the sutta for me is how these structures, these precepts, are not like ultimate realities. They're just useful, beneficial tools to create a certain kind of an order which is supportive and beneficial. And there's a tie that would be attachments. So it's the commentary associates with the bond of Mara, So then this flows right into the next idea. Forms and sounds, tastes and odors, and tactile objects drive beings mad having removed desire for these things, at the proper time, one should enter for the morning meal. And so then, if the mind and one's intentions are captured by a pleasant thing, a pleasant object, and then you hopelessly have to go on chasing after that object, then you have no freedom. But if you are able to be removed, then you do have that freedom. You will not be driven mad. Then, having obtained alms on the occasion, having returned alone, one should sit down in seclusion. Reflecting inwardly, one should not let one's mind wander outside, but should keep oneself collected. So then this is referring to the beginnings of meditation practice by turning the mind inward with mindfulness towards the four foundations of mindfulness, and having what's kind of collected, that would mean the samahita. That's like a unification of the mind. So the mind which is capable of bringing together all of the elements to focus on a single theme in meditation. You know, the mind, when you say mind is sort of an aggregate thing, and feelings, perceptions, intentions, and consciousness are, you say, a contact, and the adverting, what's called the adverting consciousness, which reaches for particular kinds of objects. All of these different phenomena are all aspects of the mind. So it could be that sometimes, like, you feel one way, but you intend a different way. I intend to be nice, but I might feel not nice, but nevertheless, I use willpower to behave or speak nicely, or to only entertain nice thoughts, and to like disregard feeling that's maybe an unpleasant feeling. But then there's a way in which like the meditation, that unification, Bhante Gunaratsana describes it as the kind of a lake where the hydroelectric plant is, that they've dammed up a valley. And so the rivulets and creeks and streams and everything from all around that watershed are all emptying down into this one space where the water's contained. And then the water collects into the Great Lake. And then when they turn on the turbines, the water goes rushing through. It's controlled, and it's rushing through the one point with tremendous power. And that's creating electricity. So that's kind of like one idea of the power of the unified mind. A different metaphor that works for me is the idea of a team who are rowing in the sculling, I guess they called it, where you have 5 or 6 athletes in one boat, and they're all pulling together in unison. So the same way, you get all of the aspects of your attention to all pull together without being distracted. And that is something that the Buddha is describing here as a side effect of, or goes together with seclusion, with taking physical seclusion. I'll go ahead with the rest of the bhikkhu's priest morality. If he should converse with a disciple or with anyone else, or with a bhikkhu, he should speak about the sublime Dhamma. He should not slander or criticize others. For some contend in debate, but we do not praise those of slight wisdom. Ties from here and there, stick to them, for they send their minds far away. Now here's that same idea about ties. So people who are clinging to opinions, engaging in debate, trying to reach spiritual success by arguing, are subjected to what kind of ties? The ties of obsession, being obsessed with some opinions, or the ties of being dissatisfied with persons who have a different idea. Or even the ties of falling into a fixed dispute, which is tending towards some kind of a schism or a settled conflict between groups that are both on the spiritual path, and yet they can't be happy together because of disputes. I missed a comment that came in before when we were talking about faith, but ehipasiko, come and see for yourself. When Buddha's teachings come true in my own life, I gain so much confidence in the Buddha, or will then come to a point realizing that these aren't my teachings, but Buddha's. Yes, that's true. So then the next part of the monk's training, alms, a dwelling with a bed and seat, and water to wash the dirt from his cloak. Having heard the Dhamma taught by the fortunate one, a disciple of the one of excellent wisdom should use these reflectively. So this is the yoniso manasikara. One of the applications of wise reflection is each time we use the requisites of life, we reflect and we think, why am I using this? Not for fun, not for pride, not for vanity, but only for the functional purpose. We use the robes to protect the body from insects and sunburn, and also for modesty. We also reflect that the robe is made up of mirror elements without an essential self, just as I am without an essential self. The robe may seem to be delightful and pleasant as it is, but after the robe has been used by this body for a certain amount of time, it becomes gross. And so there's an example of the kind of reflection that's part of the monk's practice. For in regard to alms, food, a lodging, and water to wash the dirt from his cloak, a bhikkhu will not cling to these things, as a water drop does not cling to a lotus leaf. And so this is the conclusion of the monk's training, and I would invite any questions or comments about this part. And why do you think I'm a layperson, but I could do the same thing? Is that true? Perhaps somebody who's situated without many responsibilities, or someone in their older years, could be able to almost fully realize many of these themes. And other lay people can realize it in part. I would ask the monastics here, is this almost enough without necessarily trying to fully understand and uphold all 311 rules in the Patimokkha? If we just understood these general concepts, wouldn't we be at least halfway there in terms of being fully in line with our training? Yeah. Yes, I think they're sort of agreeing with me. Yes.
These general concepts are what? Could you name the general concepts?
The concept of having few possessions, reflecting about those possessions, avoiding conflict when speaking, just speaking about the sublime Dhamma, not speaking about other subjects like wars and kings and politics and the weather and et cetera, just speaking about the Dhamma and not speaking in particular to slander and criticize individuals. And then as well, having the few needs in terms of the time that's spent mixing with people in the village, and having a substantial amount of time every day to undertake seclusion and to unify the mind in seclusion. So those are the principles that are as they're laid out in this sutta.
Something I often think about is on the path, there seems to be the things that fall away naturally and create space. And so you want less things, you want to stop eating meat, whatever it is, it sort of happens naturally, even it sort of falls away. And then there's other times when you have to push yourself. And I always wonder about the balance between, cultivating around something so that it naturally arises and occurs or falls away, and pushing yourself to find the edge where it's a little uncomfortable. And how do you know when it's too much, especially for lay people? How do you give away all your stuff and then you're in the world and your neighbors have to help you out, or whatever it might be? What's the dancing between those two ends? Is there guidance around that?
In a certain way, I would say that the monastics have an easier time than householders because we have quite a lot which is spelled out quite clearly in the provisions of the Vinaya. And so, I'll just give an example. One example is the robes, the cloth. So, we have quite a lot of guidance about accepting the robe which is given and not hinting around or specifying that you want the robe to be in such and such a way, like this size, this color, this material, sewn with this pattern, with this quality. And so then all of those specific provisions are designed to cut off that particular opportunity for greed to arise in connection with the robes. And there's a lot of other things that are quite a bit specific. Then with the householder, there's more latitude in interpretation, but there and also there's an encouragement for a certain balance. So it's not recommended for a householder to be stingy. So there was the example of the man who was stingy. He was wealthy, but he didn't want to share. And so he lived on the top of a 7-story house, and he had his wife had to bring the food up to him because he didn't want anybody to see him eating food because they might want some. He might have to share if he was, and then the joke in that story is that a bhikkhu uses magical powers to float up on the outside to the window with his alms bowl. And then the wife says, well, sir, can I just give him a piece of cake? And and he said, well, don't let anybody see it, just give him a very small piece of cake. And so she gives him a piece of cake, and then the amount of cake that's left over increases by 10 times. And then the monk wants more cake, and then she gives him some more cake. And each time she gives, it multiplies. And so this is an example that by his stinginess, his life became diminished and small and narrow and cramped and not healthy. And it's not what the Buddha recommended. But by being generous, then the sense of abundance, or the reality of abundance, occurred for him. So I would suggest that life for many people is sort of like addictive, in the sense that like you have a treat, and then if you have the same treat for 3 days in a row, then it becomes a habit. And then something that is established as a habit then becomes a necessity. And then you feel uncomfortable if you, for some reason, you have to do without that thing. And so just the same way that one is like if you use, they say if somebody thinks you might be an alcoholic, but you're not sure, they suggest if you just drink once in a while and not always on the same occasion, that's could be, if you're not binge drinking on those rare occasions, if you drink just a little bit once in a while, and if that still is comfortable for you and you don't have the cravings so multiplying, then perhaps you're not addicted to booze yet. So I'm not recommending drinking, but I'm recommending having the same cautious attitude, that if you think whatever you think you need, try to not need to have that particular thing or have it that particular way. There are some general guidance in other places about how to use one's wealth and taking care of your own self, what you save and put aside for the future, what you give to your family or your employees, and what you give away in charity or give to the bhikkhus. So those are some, kind of guidelines. It is good to eventually challenge anything that seems like it's an absolute necessity, to really interrogate yourself. And I mean, if you're addicted to brushing your teeth every morning, I don't think anybody will complain about that. But if you're saying that, like you have to have something in a certain kind of way, then could be a problem. Richard.
Thank you, Ayya. I just want to go back to that verse 388. I have Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, but it's basically the same. Then having obtained alms on that occasion, having returned alone, one should sit down in seclusion. But if you look at the Pali, this is my opinion, it's more like, having obtained your alms and everything, right? Then one should go alone and sit down in seclusion. It's not having returned alone from the alms round, because sometimes bhikkhus go together, bhikkhunis, monastic go together on alms round. But it's once having had your alms and everything, returning, then you should go alone into seclusion. In other words, don't go like a group, seclude, 3 or 4 or something or 2 or whatever together. It's like once you go alone in seclusion. Anyway, it's just a minor point, but I'm not sure why they want to translate it like returning from alms round alone. I don't know.
The translation that I'm showing you is,
Yeah.
it may be an earlier edition, but it is an edition of Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation.
Oh, it is his as well. Okay.
Yeah, here's Sujata's translation. After receiving alms for the day, on returning, a mendicant would sit in private alone.
Yeah. That's
Inwardly
to me,
reflective.
Yeah. The reason I kind of brought it up was, for one thing, he should go in private alone. That's usually they go and sit under a tree or something, by themselves somewhere, whatever. But also, there's something about the way, if you, Bhikkhu Bodhi's has it here, which makes it sound sad and lonely. Having returned alone, I don't know. It's just the reading of it to me, It's like, whereas I don't think Buddhism has that. If you really catch the flavor of it, the substance of it, I don't think it's like a lonely, practice in that sense. Even though you may do certain things alone, I think it's a very, blissful, joyful, happy practice. Anyway, it's just my point. But thank you very much for listening.
I had the impression that in the Suttanipata, there was more of a tendency to praise the solitary practice. And then later, as the communal practices and community life became a more important part of it, there was not the same emphasis on being a solitary monk wandering alone like a rhinoceros. But there is definitely a pattern of seclusion or separation between the monastic sangha and the householders in the village. If a monk is spending the whole day long being in the market, socializing and chatting with people, they would be definitely criticized. So this can have a different kind of a danger of becoming almost like a sort of a Brahmanical idea of purity, like that householders are dirty and monks are pure, and the monks have to keep themselves far away from householders because in order to keep their purity. But I think that's a bit of a distortion of what the meaning of seclusion. You want the mind to be pure because you want to be pure from greed, hatred, and delusion. And you want to practice meditation alone, and to I think when they talk about being like too much mixed up with householders, it's sort of like it's not just being in the presence of householders, but it's getting a materialistic mentality, like having a capitalistic mentality of, say, using your charisma and your charm to get a lot of goodies or to get praise and love from people, and then becoming like a dependent on wanting to be like a rock star and be praised and loved by people, because and then you seek become needy for the adulation of the crowd. So that's definitely not what's wanted. And there were bhikkhus who would go and they would flatter the householders. I was joking with somebody the other day about when you all ask questions, I have a policy to always compliment you on what a good question you asked. And you could say that I'm doing this to flatter you because I want you to like me. But that's not the reason. It's because I'm trying to I'm trying to listen. So I think a monastic who has seclusion from the hindrances and the defilements, in a way, is keeping the inner purity regardless of what they're in contact with. And then when they speak to anybody, the person who is in front of them, they actually have a lot of sensitivity and connection with that person. But it's not in terms of trading, bartering, or exchanging, or getting one's sort of feel-good strokes from making people like you or something like that. That's not what it's about at all. But it's definitely not a lonely life. Corina, you had something?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I was just going to share, similarly to how monastics, reflect on the requisites. Like you're not eating food because you want to really enjoy yourself. It's in service of your practice. I feel like as a layperson, it's similar, just that they're not called requisites, but the options are much greater. So like, and it's so important if I remember what my greater intention ultimately is. That question earlier about, should we just give away all our things, for example, to experience, to generosity? And like, for example, I can exercise and I can take care of my health because maybe I'm afraid of death, or maybe I just afraid of being disabled more when I age, or things like that. And that's I can feel that differently in my heart than if I'm taking care of my health and I exercise in order to have a good enough body and energy to practice. Like it changes how I approach it and how I experience it. And sometimes I had to make, like yesterday, I can't remember exactly what day it was, but recently I did sort of a weird decision. So there was a Dharma program online, and it was also the time of day for me to exercise because it wasn't too hot. And I've had, some of I've had some health challenges. And recently I've had this realization that I just feel drawn in too many directions. There's taking care of my health, there's focusing on my work, focusing on my family and my friends, focusing on formal practice, interacting with the monastics. And I realized I can't do all of it at once sometimes. And I'm like, well, right now I feel like the foundation of what I need is to build my health so that it's at least good enough so I could do other things, and I'm not always like struggling and back and forth. So the other day I skipped the Dharma program in service of establishing a better baseline for my health. So, and then with the future to attend the programs more. So for me, it's like, it's not such a clear line, like, oh, more Dharma is always better, or giving away more stuff is always better. It's like, there's a lot of looking at the deeper intention and how it serves long-term goals. It kind of helps me guide me. Any
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is partly answered in the next section. But as far as the external management of one's external activities, as well as the external use of the requisites, does require this kind of balancing. But the next section that we're coming to about the basic morality, you're not balancing, like you wouldn't be saying, I need to do a little bit of killing in order to make room for my health practice. so that's a distinction there. Like the ones that are as far as cutting back or gaining agency over like the sensory inputs and supports that we have is something that requires a balance. But the morality, which is related to non-harming, is not something that is has that same kind of balancing quality. Perhaps we could go ahead to the next section. The Buddha said, "Now let me tell you the householder's duty for how one should act to become a good disciple. For this entire duty of a bhikkhu cannot be carried out by one with possessions." So that's, and, you know, possessions, especially, I think, also includes attachments, such as the attachment of a spouse towards a spouse, or the attachment of a child towards a parent, or a parent towards a child. That those things are bringing one into a different realm, and it's quite it takes a maturity within that relationship to go beyond the phase in a relationship which is full of clinging and attachment, but then later that clinging can be grown out of, and there can still be a loving relationship within a family that doesn't have that quality of attachment. But it's quite difficult, and it's difficult to practice with possessions. Having put down the rod towards all beings, towards those in the world, both firm and frail, one should not kill living beings or cause to kill, nor should one approve of others who kill. Okay, this is the one where you can be an extremist in non-killing. And you could say that you will never intentionally kill another living being if you are able to control it. And you won't approve of killing. This whole teaching about, which is based on not harming, we had a lovely conversation this morning in part about this. And one of the points that came out of this is that if there's a being who is not yet fully enlightened, or a being who's not enlightened at all, and then if you kill them, their mind is very, very easily could be taken over by fear and hatred in the process of being killed. And therefore, not only did you take away their life, but you also could have roused something in them that could put them into an unfortunate rebirth for many aeons to come, because you've been arousing in them fear and hatred and distress. So obviously, all beings are subjected to impermanence, and all beings will die. And so we're not being insane in the sense that we think that because we don't believe in killing, we think it's some kind of a mistake if a person dies, or if a being dies. But at the same time, we don't participate in harming an individual in that way. Next, a disciple should not knowingly take anything not given anywhere. One should not cause stealing or approve of theft. One should entirely avoid taking anything not given. This is why they don't put me in charge when a contractor comes to work on the monastery. This happened at some point in the past. but when we didn't have any lay stewards or present at the time, but still the contractors were coming to do work. And I would have to say, well, okay, there's the money is over there. Do what you think is right. Because I couldn't, I'm not allowed to, um, uh, uh, but in business relationships, it is kind of like a contest to try to get somebody to give more than to try to give you a better deal, and that almost could be verging on theft if it's done with underhanded means. We know that in some faith traditions they have the idea that fair trade or fairness in business is a part of the ethics, which involves being able to be trading or bartering or exchanging with people without anybody being cheated or stolen in the process, right? A wise person should avoid impure conduct, as one would avoid a blazing pit of coals. But if one is incapable of this celibate life, one should not transgress with another's spouse. So the main distinction there is for when individuals have placed themselves under the protection of each other. Or alternatively, someone who's under protection in the sense that a child is under the protection of the parents. So one should not transgress with someone who's under the protection of the parents. One should not transgress with a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni who's under the protection of the sangha. This does not necessarily imply the Western concept of one man, one woman type of marriage, because that wasn't the family structure at the time of the Buddha. But what the Buddha was just saying is that sex should be in the context of what is lawful. One who has entered a council or an assembly should not speak falsely to anyone. One should not make others lie or approve of false speech. One should entirely avoid speaking untruth. And now this is speaking of musawada or false speech, particularly where in the case where, like, you've taken an oath, you put your hand on the Bible and say, I vow to say the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. And so a lot of times people will be held to one standard when they're just talking in general. And then it's sort of like to say some gossip or to spin a story or to tell a fable or something fabulous. Well, but then if you put them under oath, they wouldn't dare to say the same thing. So in our times, we feel that it's really great to be truthful all the time. So that's an expansion of this precept. But we also acknowledge that it is very, very, very difficult to be truthful all the time, because even to find out what is true is very challenging. If I say E equals MC squared, or if I say the electricity runs from the negative to the positive, already I'm speaking in metaphors. And so that's not really what's happening with the electrical current. It's not really running. So the speech should strive for what is meaningful, beneficial, and leading towards the truth, pointing towards the actual truth as much as we can. But in particular, for this advice for lay people, it's speaking about there being able to be a circumstance where the truth is really the truth, and one would speak with that much care and intentionality as one would if one were a witness in a trial and called to testify. And that's what the truth is there. Then a householder who espouses this Dhamma should not indulge in intoxicating drink. He should not make others drink or approve of drinking. Having understood that this ends in madness, because of intoxication, foolish people do evil deeds, and they make others heedless. Folk do such deeds. One should avoid this basis of demerit, delightful to fools, causing madness and delusion. So that's the summary of the 5 precepts, which the Buddha is giving as the middle path of virtue, or for one who's in the householder life who has possessions. I know for sure that if a person is able to really accomplish these 5 precepts in a way which is very consistent, they would be unusually good, unusually happy, and they would be beautiful in the sense that anybody who knows them would tend to love that person, because it would be so safe and comfortable and pleasant to be around a person who is observing this kind of fundamental morality of non-harming. If you were a child and you got born into a family where mom and dad were observing these 5 precepts very consistently, it would be like, what a boon, what a blessing, what a fantastic karma you would have to be born into a family where that was what you experienced from your parents, or as the standard that was observed in that family. Or if you were doing business and your counterpart in business was somebody who was reliable like that, how great it would be. Or if you had a government, representatives, employees, or elected officials, and if they were like that, what a nice country it would be to live in, where the officials were good like that. Actually, I had occasion, I don't usually have these opportunities, but they sent me to go to a local public hearing that was related to some zoning and regulations that are affecting the neighborhood where a monastery is located. And the people, many of the people were very concerned from a self-centered point of view, like, how is these changes going to affect me and the value of my property or the quality of my life, and wanting the officers to basically protect the good qualities of their life, not to be degraded. But what I noticed in this guy was that he was using such care, knowing like what he was authorized to say and what he himself is not authorized to say. He could say, well, that is going to be decided at this level, and these are the rules that are going to determine how they make the decision at this level, and these are the loopholes in the law which could be a danger to you, or these are the loopholes in the law which could be a protection to you. And it could be that, there's this aspect of the law which is hurting you when you want to build another unit on your property, but it's helping you when you want the neighborhood to remain quiet. So you kind of like, but the impression I had about this person, he was really trying to speak with integrity. and honesty as a, as a public servant. And so these qualities are not that, they're not unheard of, that these qualities do exist in the world of business and parenting and government and all that, but they are to be very much honored and appreciated, and one should recommend for everybody behaving up to this standard. Susan.
Thank you, Ayya, for this talk. And I wanted to ask if you have any feedback for me on challenge. I think as I've reflected, I think I feel more confident handling my own suffering because I have the practice. But when it comes to watching others suffer and doing foolish things over and over, my families in particular, who I'm talking about, my mother and sister, and there's hoarding, so which is a serious kind of thing. Anyway, I just am so powerless over this kind of samsaric, bizarre things that go on. Anyway, it causes me a lot of suffering if I get too much contact or information about it. And I probably, I mean, I stay away, and I wish I could help, but probably it might be best for my own life to, it really is disturbing. Anyway, I don't know, I'm sure you've heard stories like this before where people struggle with their family, how to, it's something like that. It's not, it's really, I don't even know how to explain it. But anyway, it's harmful for me to be very involved at all, for
Right.
me. And
So
I don't, go ahead. Thank you.
others will, whether it be the family, the work, or in many different realms, people who are involved in unskillful behavior will want you to participate in that same unskillful behavior. And as well, because of the way that the human emotional life works, there can be a certain kind of a contagion between the afflictive or negative emotions that are happening in people. The contagion can go in the other direction. So if you are radiating with wisdom, peace, and tranquility, and kindness, then it can be like a drop of water in the desert for somebody who doesn't have those qualities to encounter somebody who does have those qualities. And so that would be a reason why you should stay in contact with the family, even though they're sunken in a lot of unskillfulness. On the other hand, if the situation will tend to overwhelm you and overwhelm your practice, what you're able to manage with, to create so much disturbance in you, that then it's preventing your making progress with these teachings, then I recommend seclusion and separating yourself from those circumstances for the sake of being able to develop your own inner strength and stability, but trying not to cut off absolutely, but instead to have as much contact as you can, knowing that just being around a person who's got those kind of intentions and that stability actually can be beneficial. You can't necessarily see the good result, but there is a good result. So I don't recommend trying to force them to change or trying to do anything like that. But simply be present when you can, and when it's too much, then separate yourself. That's what I recommend in that case. Flo?
I've had I feel like a real experience with the precepts over the last few years. A few years ago, I had an attempt made on my life, and that made me very scared. And I ended up buying and carrying a firearm for a few years. And in doing that, I was making like an emotional commitment to kill. And thankfully, that never came up. But the entire time, there was this like even just emotionally accepting it was like hurting me. Like it made me more scared, and like it was harder to connect with people, and like I never felt happy with like who I was when I was doing that. And like really recently I had like a breaking point where I was like, I can't keep doing this. I feel terrible about it. Like I don't want to do it. Even if it feels scary to not, it feels worse to like keep the gun. And like even just today, like reaffirming the precepts has felt like a physical relief, like taking a weight off. Like I don't have to like carry that intention anymore in a way that it was like holding a hot coal. You want to talk about the happiness that comes from precept, like following the precepts, that feels like something I've like experienced on a very real level in my life.
That's a wonderful example of the real significance of sila. And others who have at different times in their life owned firearms and seen the strong psychological impact of having a weapon for killing, and how that affects one's spirit and one's happiness, and what an important step it is when one becomes able to put that down. So I thank you very much for sharing that. Yeah. Maureen? Maureen?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, sorry. One of the things that can help when you're in these situations is to be able to look at the situation with compassion. It kind of gives you a little bit of distance, so that you can keep your composure. I just think that compassion is a very important quality. I know loving kindness is one of the other Brahma Viharas, but compassion is also very, very helpful. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. Compassion is especially the feature that we need when we're encountering instances of dukkha or suffering. Then, and when at all times, as long as we're in this world of samsara, we can see dukkha. But if somebody is out and about in the secular world with people who are a lot less skillful in many different ways, then you got a whole different 100 universes of different kinds of suffering and misery. So then the compassion is the way to relate to that without being destabilized by being in the presence of that kind of suffering. Yeah. I did want to get to the last little bit of this sutta, which is about the 8 precepts. And it's based on this, that Buddhists all over the world have a Sabbath, that on the first day of the month, the 8th or the 15th day of the month, they will observe the extra precepts of restraint of the senses. And even for a longer period of time, they'll, in effect, go on retreat. So this is what it says. A householder who espouses this Dhamma, no, I did that already. These are the 8 precepts in paragraph 400. One should not kill living beings or take what is not given. One should not speak falsely or drink intoxicants. One should abstain from sex, from impure conduct. One should not eat at night and outside of the prescribed time. One should not wear garlands or apply perfumes. One should sleep on a bed or a mat on the ground. For this, they say, is the 8-fold Uposatha observance taught by the Buddha who has reached the end of suffering. Hence, confident in mind, having observed the Uposatha complete with its 8 factors on the 14th, 15th, and 8th of the fortnight, and during special periods. It could be like for the duration of the Vasa, or for the duration of the retreat. And this comes back to Brianna's question sometimes of deciding like where to draw the line with things that could be like too much sensual pleasure or something like that, or too much of a bad habit. It seems innocent, but maybe it's a bad habit. So if for temporary periods of time on the Uposatha, you cut out all the bad habits, and then you see like how stressful is it for the mind to not have any of those comforts and pleasures. And so to be without those external pleasures for that duration of time is a kind of like an experiment, and the space where you have the opportunity to discover that true happiness and pleasure which is within yourself and not dependent on comfortable beds, garlands, perfumes, dinner, sexual pleasure, or anything like that. In the morning, the wise person who has observed the Uposatha, rejoicing with a confident mind, should distribute food and drink to the Bhikkhu Sangha in a fitting way, or they could distribute to the Bhikkhuni Sangha also. One should righteously support mother and father. One should engage in a righteous business. A heedful person observing this practice reaches the devas, or the divine realm, called self-luminous. So these Dhammika and the 500 lay people were all non-returners. So they were all had noble attainments. They were noble disciples of the Buddha, although they still could have engaged in having possessions and business and so forth. The happiness of giving is also a part and parcel. There are many other suttas that speak about generosity, and that is the second foundational practice. A person who has strict morality without being generous might not experience that happiness. But morality, which is a bit like a discipline, and generosity, which is, just the outpouring and opening up. So both of those things together are the basis for this divine life. I know that we've gone 10 minutes over the time. Are there other questions, or does anybody need to know more about how to observe the Uposatha? I very much recommend it. If your schedule allows you to observe it on the lunar days, the Uposatha days, then you will be observing at the same moment that people all over the world who are Buddhists are observing the Uposatha, and that has a certain strength of its own. But if your schedule means that the time you have available is Saturday or Sunday, then you should consider regularly observing this time of taking additional precepts, either twice a month or more than that, or on a period of time that you've taken for something like a retreat time with extra precepts.
And in taking, you mean doing?
I mean, undertaking, making a decision to uphold those precepts and upholding them on a temporary basis. Yeah. So, dear friends, this may be enough for this afternoon. I thank everybody for your patient listening, for your good practice, and for your excellent questions. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhamman Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Samham Namami.
Thank you, Ayya.
Okay. We'll see you on Tuesday, maybe.
I hope so. So late. Okay. Thank you, though.